eagles will be gathered together. Um, Now, this is a referral of something to do with what he's talking of, a prophecy of what might happen. What will happen in the days ahead, that when he's, after his time has passed, many years to come. Maybe this moment that we are, you and I are at this moment, but the other test, this test here to tell you about what was to come, that's Matthew 22 all the way to 2026, I think. you know yeah, Matthew 20, 24 actually, verse 24. It goes all the way down to about 28, 29, explaining what will happen, and giving an idea of false ideas, or false lies, people who are not really telling honest truth, pretending to be what they're pretending to be, something they're not, deceiving many. Now, if before that, we have in verse 6, in verse 5 of the same 24, it says, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Many will come in my name, saying that I am the Christ, and will deceive many." Okay, pretending, saying that I am the Christ. Now, this statement here, somebody using somebody in the format of, to convince you. Either he is saying that it could be two different ways, or three. It depends on how you interpret it. But the whole idea is that they will come acknowledging that I am the Christ, just to deceive you. Okay, if you the Christ is like, if they say, as we know now, Jesus is being seen as the Christ, and that is being used to convince people, and many to sort of fall into the idea that Jesus is the Christ. Now, whoever Jesus is, it's up to you to find out who Jesus is. If you look in the book, you realize that it's been told for us to believe in the dictionary, in whichever commentary you might choose, that it is Jesus is a translation of Yehoshua. That is the man of which the whole entire story is about. That is the Jewish was called Yehoshua. In Jewish name, they call him Yehoshua. So he should be the true person in the name. That is the true identified name is Yehoshua. But the Latins and the Greeks and all that, as times goes on, as they jump, as the whole gospel, or the gospel of the Yehoshua at that time was being rejected by most of the Jews, and those who pick it up were feeling more drifting away to the European side. They drifted away, especially a man like Paul, expanding the message, went up all the way. He was divinely, somehow spiritually called. It's not to compare to the other disciples, Peter and John and the rest, who were personally called by him, the founder, or the Christ. But then, who was acclaimed to be the Christ, somehow, after dead and gone, risen and gone, he ended up, telling a story that he saw him and he has called him upon to come. He was tested by most of the disciples, and they see Paul as, yes, being okay. So they gave him the chance to pursue, because he knew scriptures as well, because he was a religious person before he converted to that. But he was a religious person going against the followers of the Christ, and he had to fall into that trance, or that situation where he had to end up converting to become a follower of Christ. And he brought the gospel all the way to the Europe. The Greeks now took over. At that time, the Rome and all that was still existing. They were controlling. Even it was the Romans who had to do the execution of the Christ, the Yehoshua, according to the Bible story. So Paul now has got the thing into and he's educated in so many grounds. He was convincing the Roman elites, or the Roman kings, or the Roman pontiffs, or the Roman emperors, as time goes on gradually. and he was convincing great people. Somebody like Constantine, who is a leader at that time, had to fall under the same grounds of being convinced through what Paul had to do there. Paul's work there in Rome. So Paul was many times imprisoned there. If you hear the story about him, basically that's what he was doing, just to reach out to the people, reach out to the top people. And over time, the religion got accepted there. And translation had to go on, because most Greeks or Romans were Greeks and Latins and all that. So they had to translate it from Hebrew to that. All these translations went on. Now it was now in a European area, which today UK and all these countries are all within this area of Europe. So that's how the message has to come here. Now they had to hold on to it. They then translated to English as the language was being shifted to another, because the empire was going off. A new phase of group of generation was taking over. They held on to it. It had to break off, but it was found again, because we are still having archaeological, we are still discovering things, whichever way. So they found all these things, in a sense, trying to keep the tradition, but they had to translate it to English. Now, translating that, the name had to be translated from Juju. That's what you're supposed to believe. Translated from what? Yehoshua to Jesus. And so, however format the translations are made, names should have always been kept as a name. Well, languages could be translated, because a name is not necessarily something that you should translate. Now, whether they have picked a name and say that is the person, nobody can really tell. Because if, as I said, if I have a will, nothing of God should be changed. Immediately you try to do the translation, the text end up being changing. So many things will be changed. You probably will say it's the same thing. But if you say a name is an ID. It identifies the person. It sort of have a meaning to it. If you change it, whatever format you decide to change it, if I name my child, that child's name will be like that, will stay like that everywhere she goes or where he goes. If the child decides to change the name, he might change the name. As long as the name stay like that, the meaning and the definition of the name is very much intact, or somehow still as it should be. But if you change the name, you don't have the meaning as it is anymore. Now, in this sense, it is being known to be translated. That is more of to be seen as more of acceptable excuse. And I say, if you translate something, you have somehow, in many ways, put it in a different language to say. But name is not a language. A name is an ID. A name of a thing, a name of whatever, is something that identifies something. You say table. In this language, you will say table, and you will sort of translate it to another language. They will speak it. They will have a different way of calling tables. These are names of things. A name of a person is something that identifies somebody, a living thing. And they say they can call camels and all that differently. If you say human being, you can translate it in so many ways for people to understand that it's the name of a living thing. That's a general name. But the name of a person, the name by which his ID is not translatable. Even if you can, you don't have any reason to do that. You can translate him as a human being for everybody to have that. Okay, we're talking about a human being. That's generally can be translated. All languages can have a way of, saying the word human being. But that human being has got an idea of a name. Like you can change somebody's fingerprints. That's how it's compared to the name of a person. You should be seeing something compared to his fingerprints. You can change somebody's fingerprints, so you can change the name. You can change my eyes. You don't have to change my eyes unless something it becomes necessary to. But there's no point. It is an ID. These are all part of me. So a name is given to somebody to be a part of the ID, to identify the person. So if my name is Arafat, it stays as Arafat.